You can do an oral, it can be real neat. There's probably more lyrics to that. I'm not much of a lyricist. My wife could probably make up some really funny lyrics to something like that. I'm just trying to capture some of the joy. Are you having joy in this experience? You should have some joy. You know, you get to pick your global issue, you get to pick your extract. Hopefully you're doing something that means something to you. And so it's not a bad process. Here's my workspace that I'm working with right now. I have got my bullets, which are on the way. They're right here. I've got my global issue articulated. I got the opening done. I talked about Lincoln in the Bardo as an overall work. And my global issue is depictions of human suffering in literature. So that's coming along. Now is the time for me to look at my extract. So this is the extract that I selected. How do you select an extract? Well, you want to pick an extract. Like if you had to say to yourself, in this whole novel, where is this global issue most clearly articulated or most powerfully articulated? Or where in this novel or this poem or piece of drama or nonfiction or whatever, or where can I say to myself, okay, here I can explain what's going on? And so this is my first attempt. What I need to do is turn this reading. So my reading, I thought about it, I highlighted some things. You know, you can't use a highlighted text like this when you do your actual oral, but at this part of the process, yeah, you want to have it annotated. It's crazy though, because there's only 2 minutes. You only have 2 minutes. So I've got 2 main authorial choices that I want to talk about based on what I read. I've got visual imagery, and I also have parentheses, use of parentheses. And along the way, I think I want to talk about syntax very briefly. I want to talk about this character very briefly. And so my question is, can I squeeze that into 2 minutes? That's what I'm working on right now. I'm going to build this bullet point, which is right here. So my extract bullet point, and I'm just going to, I'll probably fast forward some things and let's see what's going on here. And so what I did is like, I kept asking myself this question as I read it. How is suffering depicted? What should the reader take away from this understanding of suffering? What am I going to gain? Writers write novels for sometimes reasons they don't even understand themselves. But in the end, there has to be some value or nobody would care about it. So the idea is that me as a reader, this is my belief. I believe that in this novel, there is something valuable to humans for me to understand about suffering. Otherwise, I would have picked a different global issue. I would have picked a different work. So it's on me that like, it's in here. I'm saying it's in here. Now I'm going to look at that closely. So here's what I came up with. And it's right here. It's messy. It's sloppy. It's because like this is my process. It's okay. So I think that in this extract, which you can read right now if you want to, you can read that. In this extract, what we have is like the power of the possibility of suffering. And you don't really understand that unless you understand the context of this character in this moment in the novel. But like Saunders is trying to communicate, or he successfully communicates with respect to suffering, the mental aspects that suffering can have. It can be a powerful shaper of identity, and it might not even be physical suffering. So this is an experience that this character has, Reverend Everly Thomas. He doesn't experience anything physical in this moment. In fact, it takes place after he's already dead and he knows it. But it examines like this idea of Christian judgment. So like one thing that you might do at this point is like, I've got these ideas right here. I'm just going to talk about it for 2 minutes. I'm a very big believer in like, do it. Do it. Record it. Look at it. See what you've created, and like then move on, and then see what else you need. So I'm going to do that right now with just my 2-minute timer. So you can see the timer. I can see the timer. I'm thinking about the timer, but I'm thinking about if I just read this, my first draft, what is it that I say, and how does that feel? Does it feel like I'm doing the things the rubric is telling me that I need to do? And those things are right over here. So the rubric is telling me I have to have an analysis and evaluation of the extracts that are relevant and insightful. So I am doing some analysis of this particular extract by noticing certain authorial choices and then pointing towards meanings that are constructed through the selection of those particular choices. Thorough, nuanced understanding of how the authorial choices are used to present the global issue. How the choices impact the presentation of the issue for the reader. Ultimately, that's what it is all about. So let me give it a try. I'm just going to try and see what happens. Here we go, 2 minutes. I'm now going to examine a specific extract from Lincoln in the Bardo. This extract takes place in approximately the middle of the novel, and it features a character whose name is Reverend Everly Thomas. Reverend Everly Thomas is dead, and unlike almost every other character in the novel, he knows that he's dead because he's already been to what for him was an experience with Christian judgment. And so I'm going to talk about 2 specific authorial choices in this moment in the novel. And ultimately the takeaway is that human suffering is very, very powerfully is a shaper of behavior and identity, and this suffering doesn't even have to be physical. So first I want to talk about some visual imagery. There are very graphic depiction of tortures of the damned, like in a Christian judgment, that is really evocative of Dante. So those quotes drawn from the extract would be the tent. He finds himself in a tent that is no longer silk but flesh. People around him are in various stages of flaying. There's like a beast-like satanic character that is bloody-handed and long-fanged with bits of innard speckling the body. So this has a very visceral impact because this is a character that the reader identifies with. He's a very empathetic character generally. I also want to talk about in the recollection that Reverend Everly Thomas has in this moment. Saunders uses all these parentheticals. So as he is recalling what he saw, it's almost like he is re-traumatized through the memory. And so this is how this issue of suffering, the memory of suffering, is very powerful. And some of those parentheticals are like their own intestines terrible. And that's one that has an exclamation point for it, but you can see that in this moment, as he's remembering the pain that he witnessed, terrible, through the use of that exclamation point, we can see that he is once again experiencing, being re-traumatized by this, what is very powerful. Okay, so you can see I'm out of gas right there, and I was also about 12 seconds too long. So this is like really, really hard. It is a very difficult thing about this task because how do I go to adequate depth in 2 minutes? I don't know. I'm going to try to. I'm trying to get one that I think is a 7. That's my goal. So I'm going to go back to my bullet point and see if I could more carefully articulate things so that I'm more like reading a bullet point that has already been, you have to eliminate really a lot of the thinking time, and maybe it's possible. So I'm gonna work on that bullet point a little bit, and see what we come up with. Depicted in such a way that
emphasizes
something he saw, empathy. So it becomes very real for the reader. Brutalizing. He's a very kind, kind of gentle soul. And okay. Oh yes, very long sentence.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 150. Okay, so parentheses. Parentheses. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Parentheses.
Okay, so I'm going to give this maybe another try now. I turn it into one long bullet point, and we'll see if that works for me to get everything in. So what I decided to do is I noticed that one of the sentences that has parentheses in it is actually quite long. It is 150 words, and so that got me like thinking about, well, it's, you know, that's unusual syntax for one thing. That's a good thing to mention, but I think that if I talk about just 2 examples from that one sentence and talk about how that impacts the reader, that might work a little better. So now what? Now I need to bring this. This is actually the 5th quadrant that I'm working in right now, because in my introduction I mentioned Szymborska first and then Saunders. And so that is the order that I will proceed. And so this is actually the last 2-minute segment. It just happens to be the one that I'm working on right now. The extract that I've selected features Reverend Everly Thomas. Takes place in about the middle of the novel. Reverend Everly Thomas is unique in that he knows that he's dead. He has returned to the Bardo after what he perceives as Christian judgment. And he flees and runs back into the Bardo. He's terrified throughout the novel, but he's a very kind and warm character. So I want to talk about how the presentation of suffering in this particular extract emphasizes the mental aspects. Fear of pain and the memory of pain, and that suffering for human beings often exists only in the mind. I'm going to, in this extract, horrific tortures are described, but no pain was experienced by Reverend Everly Thomas. It's something that he saw. So in the visual imagery, we have graphic depictions of torture of the damned, almost evocative of Dante. No longer silk but flesh. He's in a flesh tent, a tent that's made of flesh. He can see it. There's a beast that is bloody-handed and long fangs who has bits of innard speckling. So this is something that he saw and didn't physically experience himself, but he's a very empathetic character. The next thing that I want to talk about is the use of parentheses in a very long sentence that follows. The sentence is 150 words long, and there are 4 parentheses. This parentheses is very powerful in that it gives us another, like looking back upon the experience. This is like the re-traumatization of a character that we feel very strongly for. And so he is suffering in his memory of recalling the suffering. And those specific parentheses, one of them is the word just terrible. As he's recalling, in parentheses, we have terrible with an exclamation point. Another point is a person who is being tortured meets eyes with him, and he says, his eyes, horror-filled, met mine. Is that okay? I think that that's closer. I think that's closer enough that I'm going to conclude this video. I can make them on Szymborska's poetry, or I might just skip ahead. So I guess let me know in the comments if you think that you want to see some more examples of this thought process. If you want them, I can do them. Otherwise, I'll probably just move on to the example, and maybe you're ready to move on to the example now too, because you're ready to do it.